This is Callie from Teotihuacan. This is also Callie again. Another image of Callie. And Callie and Bahima. This is a depiction of Callie from the Aztecs. And this is a sculpture of Callie made by the Aztecs. Callie's father is known only as Vulcan, the Will King, or Odin, meaning Great King, in a similar construction to O-Sensei, Great Teacher. Now I will set the stage for the War of the Gods from the Scandinavian perspective. In Hilda's words, quote, "The people of the north, whose thunder god brought life-giving rain, lived on the edge of survival, constantly aware of the grim underworld where the monsters dwelt and the threat to their precious little world once the forces of the world serpent, Chaos, were unleashed." End quote. Into this mythology comes Odin. It is said of Odin that he set kings a-warring. He weaves the doom of the mighty and fills Flagthon with noble shapes. He is described as a one-eyed man in a blue cloak. Odin himself plunged a sword into the cosmic tree. Hilda writes, quote, "The worshippers of Odin were kings and princely warriors, and to leaders who promised to dedicate those they slew to the god, victory was granted. He was able to lay fetters of panic, paralyzing terror, or fatal hesitation on doomed men, while giving those he favored wild intoxication which freed warriors from inhibition and fear. But Odin is accused of treachery and broken faith, since his promise of victory to his followers was something in the very nature of things could not be kept forever. Quote, "The gray wolf is watching the abode of the gods. Odin himself was not immune from mortality." End quote. Odin is associated with human sacrifice, a practice which predated his time period. The form the human sacrifice took was the ultimate insult to the tree of life. People were hung in the trees and at the same time stabbed in the heart. The heart was stabbed because the murderers were mentally ill and only heart could stand against them and win. The sacrifices were also carried out in buildings called will halls, Walhalla in German, Valhall in Old Norse. The word Valkyria in Old Norse is Valkyrie in German and means will killers. In Sanskrit, Valkyrias means will hall killers. These are some pictures of will halls. This is the Chaitya Hall at Karla, India. This is a replica in Zealand, Denmark. This is in Japan. This is Chichen Itza. And this is in Greece. The sacrifice ceremonies included alcohol among other herbal drugs. The old High German word for the herb Artemisia is worm wuota, translated as snake madness. English Vatic is German wuat. Wormwood was used to brew absinthe. The Einherjar in Old Norse were winehearts in German, and the berserks are beer suckers in German. Based on the word changes from Old High German to Old Norse or English, and other psychology, you can determine the contact record for these practices. The unfortunate spread of human sacrifice in Europe and the world is referred to as the fall of man. In the context of the fall of man emerges the character Kali, who grew up in his father's sad household. For many reasons, you find Kali in India with his wife Ulupi. Kali is described by Black Elk as, quote, "He was a big, shiny black stallion, and his mane about him like a cloud. His eyes were like the sunset star. It was beautiful, but it was also terrible. Standing in a great hoop about their black chief, 4 virgins stood, and one held the wooden cup of water, one the white wing, one the pipe, and one the nation's hoop. All the universe was silent." End quote. Black Elk also says, quote, "The South is the source of life. The flowering stick truly comes from there." End quote. In the Mahabharata, Kali is described as, quote, "Narayana in his heaven by Akuntha, he who bears the discus and the club. His garments are yellow and whose complexion is dark." And Hari replied, "I am Yama." Then from Satyavat's body, Yama forcibly drew out a person. Bound by his noose, the body was not fair to look on. Then Yama set off southwards, the spear of Indra. It blazed like the night of Yama, decked with nooses, like death's own sister. End quote. While Kali is in India, he drugs and rapes Draupadi, a Panchala princess. This event is recorded in Scandinavian mythology. Hilda writes, quote, "He touched her with a piece of magic bark, gave her a drugged drink, and in this way gained his will with her, and she was left bearing his child. The son Bowie would grow up to kill his father." End quote. Draupadi was a virgin and a virtuous woman, and she would raise an amazing son named Bahima. Fearful of her kin, Draupadi cast her son away in the river, despite his auspicious marks. This is confirmed when upon Bahima's death, the goddess Ganga, Bahima's mother, laments his death, but is reminded that her son's birth as a human was the result of a curse. Ongoing tribal warfare in India becomes full-scale nuclear war in the War of the Gods between Bahima, the allies of the Panchala people, and Kali and the allies of the Kalinga people who have accepted Kali. Kali is married to Citrangada, a princess of Manalura, a coastal city. Visual inspection and understanding of a natural nuclear explosion, which occurred in a volcano in South Africa 10 million years ago, was possibly made as early as 100,000 years ago. To this day, accurate atomic theory is maintained in the Buddha Dharma tradition in the Nyaya Vaisesika school. In the Mahabharata, nuclear weapons are referred to as, quote, "the Brahma weapon," or the weapon of Narayana, which, when deployed by the mind, storms break out in a cloudless sky and the earth trembles. Inconceivable energy, infinite rays entering a small vessel, are concentrated within it for want of space. The countless shafts could not find room for expansion. Improperly used, the weapon will destroy the entire world. End quote. The response of the population to the use of nuclear weapons is clear. Quote, "You have fought in breach of Dharma. Commit no further acts of great cruelty. Cast down your unfailing weapons and step onto the road of eternity." End quote. Guns were also used in the War of the Gods. This is a picture of a gun from the Sutton Hoo ship burial in Britain. The word gun is preserved in many languages. In Old Norse, it is Gungnir, the spear of Odin. In Sanskrit, it is Gandiva, Arjuna's bow. In Khoisan, gun is Gaunab. Aircraft were also used in the war, and this is why Hari, also known as Kali, is the eighth avatar, or in English, aviator, of Vishnu. There is one sad event of special note which occurred before the deciding event in the War of the Gods. Ulupi, the African wife of Kali, visited Bahima. From the Mahabharata quote, Queen Citrangada and Ulupi together approached Draupadi with due politeness and then visited Bahima and greeted him politely. End quote. An amazing and sadder version is told in the Scandinavian mythology. Hilda writes, quote, She dared disobey the commands of Odin and gave victory to a king the god had condemned to death. As punishment for this, she was placed by Odin within a wall of fire, where she lay in an enchanted sleep. End quote. For helping Bahima understand what was real and what was not real, Ulupi was sacrificed by Kali in a will hall, and the hall set on fire. The necklace which Ulupi wore was found in the ashes. This is a picture from Mon Västergötland, Sweden, of a replica of Ulupi's necklace. The decisive event in the War of the Gods was Bahima killing Kali in hand-to-hand combat, as was the custom for leaders in war. I will refer to the Scandinavian version from Kali's perspective. Quote, In a fight a war fetter came upon him, and he twice fought off this paralysis of the will. But the third time it overcame him, and he went down before his enemy's weapons. End quote. This is a picture of the event from a die found at Torslanda on the island of Åland in the Baltic. Black Elk also records the event. Quote, I had the cup of water in one hand, and in the other was the bow that turned into a spear as I swooped down, and the spearhead was sharp as lightning. It stabbed the blue man in the heart, and as it struck, I could hear the thunder rolling, and every living being cried in gladness with whatever voice it had. You see, I had been riding with the storm clouds and had come to earth as rain, and it was drought that I had killed. End quote. The end of the War of the Gods was celebrated by the peoples from the four corners at the base of the Tian Shan mountain range near the central mountain of the world, Tangiri Shagni. The event is recorded by Black Elk. Quote, As I looked and wept, I saw that there stood on the north side of the starving camp a sacred man who was painted red all over his body, and he held a spear as he walked into the center of the people, and there he lay down and rolled. And when he got up, it was a fat bison, and where the bison stood, a sacred herb sprang up right where the tree had been, in the center of the nation's hoop. I know now what this meant. The people all seemed better when the herb had grown and bloomed, and I could see a light breeze going from the north among the people like a ghost. And suddenly the flowering tree was there again at the center of the nation's hoop. And when I looked down upon my people yonder, the cloud passed over, blessing them with friendly rain, and stood in the east with a flaming rainbow over it. End quote. This is a picture of the event from the Aztec perspective with Bahima in the center. This is a picture of that same celebration drawn by the Navajo. When Bahima died, he was placed on a ship and floated into the Ganges River. The ship was then set on fire, and he was returned to the water. Sadly, the Kali Yuga has not yet ended. That will be decided by the species as a whole. The next event I will address occurred approximately 14,000 years ago and is referred to in Scandinavian mythology as the disaster at Ragnarok. In Sanskrit, Radronak. This was the end of the world's largest empire at the time, located on the Sunda Shelf, caused by a 7-day super hurricane. The Atalan Empire and its capital city of Ragnarok was destroyed, beginning a large migration of people by ocean-going canoe and by sailing ship. This is a picture from Berg, Norway, from a storybook of those events, showing ships with keels and sails. Some of the displaced peoples arrived in Japan and the Korean peninsula and integrated with the existing population. The people related to present-day Okinawans also migrated to Africa, creating a new language, Kohoisan. The differences in language and genetics between the Japanese and the Koreans are related to the two different main tribal peoples who migrated there after the disaster at Ragnarok. People migrated as far as the Americas, which had been previously populated. The descendants of the capital city of Ragnarok ended up in Teotihuacan after the destruction of their round pyramid at Suizuilco, Mexico. The Mayan people represent one of the ruling tribes of the Atalan Empire, and that is why they had the artifact called the Crystal Skull. The Aztecs represent the army from Atlan and several tribal peoples. That is why they have a patron god of war, Huitzilopochtli, who was the highest-ranking surviving officer. The Inca and many other people were part of this migration. That concludes my history presentation. I am now going to focus on the life of Black Elk and his life story as it is relevant to my psychological and conceptual evaluation of the species. Black Elk was an Oglala Sioux medicine man born in the winter of 1863 on the Little Powder River. Here is part of his story in his own words. Quote, "My friend, I am going to tell you the story of my life, as you wish, and if it were only the story of my life, I think I would not tell it. For what is one man, that he should make much of his winters, even when they bend him like a heavy snow? So many other people have lived that story to be grass upon the hills. It is the story of all life that is holy and good to tell, and of us two-leggeds sharing it with the four-leggeds and the wings of the air and all green things. For these are the children of one mother, and their father is one spirit. This, then, is not the tale of a great warrior or of a great traveler, although I have made much meat in my time and fought for my people as a boy and a man, and have gone far and seen strange lands and men. So also have many others done, and better than I. These things I shall remember by the way, and often they may seem to be the very tale itself, as when I was living them in happiness and sorrow. But now that I can see it all as from a lonely hilltop, I know it was the story of a mighty vision, given to a man too weak to use it, of a holy tree that should have flourished in a people's heart with flowers and singing birds, and now is withered, and of a dream that died in bloody snow. But if the vision was true and mighty, as I know it is true and mighty yet, for such things are of the spirit world, and it is in the darkness of their eyes that men get lost. So I know that it is a good thing I am going to do, and because no good thing can be done by any man alone, I will first make an offering to the spirit of the world, that it may help me to be true. When I look back now from this hill of my old age, I can still see the butchered women and children lying heaped and scattered all along the crooked gulch, plain as when I saw them with eyes still young. And I can see something else died there in the bloody mud, and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream, and I, to whom so great a vision was given in my youth, has done nothing. For the nation's hoop is broken and scattered. There's no center any more, and the sacred tree is dead. I recall the great vision you sent me. It may be that some little root of the sacred tree still lives. Nourish it then, that it may leaf and bloom and fill with singing birds. Hear me, not for myself, but for my people. I am old. Hear me, that they may once more go back into the sacred hoop and find the shielding tree. End quote.